The long international break. Some are saying the longest one ever. It sure felt like that. It's over. We're 2 days away from Premier League football. Joe, this is the happiest of happy hours. Let's get it started. It is the United Happy Hour presented by the Elite Football Show. I'm Pauly Questel. As always, I'm joined by my great buddy, Joe. Good evening, everybody. Good evening in the comments. Get involved tonight. Manchester United are back, sort of. We haven't played any games yet, but, you know, we're in the normal routine now of Thursday night into Friday before a match day. Ollie is going to meet with the media tomorrow. There's going to be some bad quotes. There's going to be quotes taken out of context. People are going to argue. Oh, it's good to be back.
No, I agree. Yeah, it's this is what we all live for. In club football, it's definitely in England. I think it's what everybody wants. It's what everyone craves. Like you said, it feels like it's been the longest international break ever. I don't know what it's all about. I don't know if it's during a lockdown. I mean, everybody at the moment in England is obviously struggling with this. So the days feel like they're going slower anyway, Paulie. So I think that's probably why, you know, it's felt like a long one. But yeah, can't wait to be back Saturday.
Yeah, it's great. We've got a lot to do. We're going to look forward to West Brom. We got a lot to talk about. The social media was buzzing again today. We will look forward to West Brom. Get involved in the comments. Like and subscribe to the Elite Football Show. We want to hear from you. Join the conversation. Let us know how you would line up against West Brom. We're going to talk about that. We'll put up all the 11s, and I will go through them and tell you why certain of them wouldn't make sense or would be wrong. Let's get involved. A lot happening today. No better place to start. So, Joe, why don't we go through what's going on social media today?
So what's going on social media today? And it may not necessarily be United-related, Paulie, but, well, it kind of is in a way. And I guess that's why we have to talk about it. The big news, Pep Guardiola has committed his future to Manchester City after agreeing a new 2-year deal at the club. So simple question to kick us off, Paulie. What are your thoughts on this?
My first thought is, what is Mauricio Pochettino doing right now when he saw this news and he's just like, you know, what job is going to be available for me anymore? Things, United aren't sacking Solskjaer. City now, everybody thought Pep was gone, and maybe I would sneak in there. Bayern Munich, obviously. Oh, how do I get a job these days?
I know. Yeah, no, it's interesting, isn't it? And I think, well, let's be honest, Paulie, his job opportunities will open up again on Saturday, according to social media. If United don't get a good result against West Brom, will they all of a sudden it'll look like he's probably a game or two away from the Old Trafford job? It is interesting. He's been linked with a whole host of jobs. Mauricio, obviously, since he left Tottenham, it's complications there because technically he's still being employed by Tottenham, hasn't he, with some clause in his contract or something where they've been paying him money still. So it's been difficult for him to take anything and clubs take him on. But yeah, I mean, let's look at this Pep news and relate it to Manchester United. And what do you think that this actually means for the other side of Manchester? I mean, I found the 2 years and the fact that it's only 2 years quite interesting. I don't know about you, Paulie.
That was the biggest thing to me is we look at this team and Messi to City. Yeah, I put them as the favorites because it certainly sounds like Messi's going to leave Barcelona for free next summer. And why not go over to Pep? I'd welcome that because, look, United aren't going to compete for the title this year. They're probably not competing for the title next year. If City prolongs it, yeah, that sucks. We don't want them to win it. But right now it's either basically City or Liverpool. And you look at Messi's numbers this year, and it certainly looks like Father Time is catching up with him. Yeah. Father Time catches up to everybody.
Yeah.
Leo Messi, compared to mere mortals, is still really, really good. So when Messi isn't playing like Messi, he's still amongst the best in the world. But compared to Messi, he is drastically worse. And you would expect that that's not a trend that at the age of 35 would typically get reversed. And then having to come to a new league in England, adapt to that. I'm not going to say he's not going to be successful because, Messi could easily come in and score 18 goals for City, but 18 goals from Lionel Messi is not nearly as bad as you would think when you think Messi. But my initial thought was, and everybody's initial thought was, we know that this is a team that's getting towards the end. Look, they already dropped from 90 something points to 81 last year. They're off to a poor start this year because Pep wears out eventually. His tactics are very overwhelming, and eventually it wears out. It wore out at Barcelona. He didn't get to the point where it wore out at Bayern, but you're starting to see it wear out. He lost David Silva, and Phil Foden's been very good, but he hasn't been David Silva. Like, those are big shoes to fill, and he hasn't filled them completely. There's nothing against him there. It just seems like it's gotten a little stale. And so everybody knew this team needs to be rebooted anyway. Like, their older players are towards the end of their prime years.
Yeah.
And Pep's never rebooted a team before. He's never rebuilt a team. So it's an interesting challenge to see him try to undertake that. That's the initial thought from everybody. And then I looked at it again and said, you know what? I think they are just trying to get every ounce of energy out of this squad, and keep him around for that, to see if we could just, for 2 more years, because in 2 years, that's when it'll all really blow up. And that's when they'll get the, flexibility to really rebuild. And
I think, Paulie, you make a great point there about this idea that Pep Guardiola's tactics become tiresome, and I think you've only got to look at Man City over the last sort of season and a half, and I mean, you probably haven't got the numbers there because obviously it's not United, but you can see with the eye test, Paulie, they do look a lot slower these days in their pressing intensity, in their urgency to win the ball back. Just the players generally don't seem to be closing down as quick as they were in the first couple of years of Pep Guardiola's reign. And I think, again, that's just further evidence of what you're saying, that, the way he wants you to play, the demands he puts on you after a 3 or 4 year period, it does become very challenging. And the same's been said about Mourinho as well in the past. And obviously the evidence is there with the average length of job that Mourinho's had. I think it's a really good point. And I know what you're saying about getting the most out of the players that he's got left, but how much more do they want to give him? Because I think we're already seeing signs, Paulie, that a lot of these players are, are coming to the end of this. And I think it's interesting to look at the impact that Torres has had on the team. I think he's coming quite good, but again, he's new to the side. He's new to Pep Guardiola. He's new to fresh to all what's expected of him. So that's great. But Kevin De Bruyne is still going to be there in a couple of years' time, I would imagine. Gabriel Jesus, other players like that, players that have been working under Pep for some time now. So how long can they sustain this for? And the other thing is the longer they sort of narrowly miss out on titles to Liverpool or don't win the Champions League and they don't get that monkey off the back, that's another punch in the stomach that just takes a bit more air out of them, I think.
Yeah, and we get this question from Mark. It must be a concern for United having to compete with a team that has Guardiola at the helm. I mean, but we've been competing with a team that has Guardiola at the helm for the last 4 years. Yeah. And under Solskjaer, we've done very well with that. It's beating everybody else that is the issue. And from Arvind here, is 2 years enough for a reboot? Well, that's the point. And that's the point I'm trying to make is you look at this core right now of De Bruyne and Aguero, Jesus, Sterling, Bernardo Silva. He's on the young side, so let's take him out. But Mahrez, those guys are at the end of their prime. So if you want to do a reboot, obviously these guys still play a role in here. But as you get older and older, like De Bruyne's going to be 30 soon, you can't rely on them to lead you in the Champions League and the Premier League every single week. It becomes more of a situation like Scholes at the end of his career, where Ferguson said, I can get a peak Scholes performance here if I don't play him in the 2 games beforehand. So like, when do I pick and choose how to use him? And obviously he's going to be bringing in some younger players into the mix at the time. But in order to really rebuild this team, he's got to clear out some, not all, but some of these guys. That's what Ferguson always did. He moved on from Beckham. He moved on from Van Nistelrooy. He kept his core: Giggs, Scholes, Neville. Ferdinand eventually joined that core, but everybody else kind of picked and changed. And this is the kicker. It looks a lot like Liverpool, how Klopp's contract goes until 2024 when we know he'll take the German job. And Salah, Mane, Firmino, like they basically have tied all of them up till the same year. De Bruyne, Sterling, Gundogan, Mahrez, all of their contracts expire in 2023. Yeah. So it really sounds like, because the reality is some of these guys need to be moved on if you want to rebuild, but that's not going to happen. I mean, nobody in this day and age not only can afford players like this, but they all are, all the teams that are smart enough to not do that anymore. They are not going to spend a lot of money on a 31-year-old Riyad Mahrez and get him out of his contract. It's the same situation as Paul Pogba. And if you're Gundogan or Mahrez, Sterling's a bit of a different story because he's younger, but he also started playing at a young age. But I would think Sterling's the only one on that list that might get a contract extension. The rest of them, they'll probably just let them run their contracts out because that's what City do. City understand that financial flexibility is the biggest key to a rebuild. And it's better to get what you can out of them. And it's okay to let them leave for free because not paying them is better than, protecting your assets so you can get a transfer fee. It's better to just not have to pay them anymore. So you let them leave in people forget this, but when Pep came in, he couldn't just, he threw a lot of money around. Let's call a spade here. Threw a lot of money around. City might have been violating some FFP rules. They're not going to get away with that again. But he also had some limitations, and the amount of players that he had to just wait to move on before he could really get the team that he wanted. You look at his first season. All right, Martin Demichelis was the only player that was released, but the following year they released 1, 2, 3. This is thrilling radio right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players. They just let their contracts run out. Willie Caballero, Gael Clichy, Jesus Navas, Bakary Sagna, Pablo Zabaleta, Bruno Zuccolini, who I've never heard of. That's a lot of players on high wages that they just that they let them run out and cleared them out so that they could then use that money to spend elsewhere. So to me, this seems like they're just trying to keep the band together, squeeze every last bit of energy out. He'll bring in his Ferran Torreses and he's going to give Ferran Torres and Phil Foden bigger roles.
Diaz, people like that. Ruben Diaz brought in,
He'll bring them in so that he can, pick and choose his spots for De Bruyne and Mahrez. Yeah. But then, in 2023, when it's time to actually bring in a new manager, they'll let these guys go. And then that new manager will be able to spend a ton of money because they'll have all this wage relief and everything.
Yeah, to be honest with you, Paulie, I think we're already seeing this with him, aren't we? We're seeing this with Fernandinho for the last year or so. He's having to pick and choose when Fernandinho plays. He's going to have to do the same with Aguero once he gets a run of fitness. There's no way Aguero's going to be able to play 3 times a week, I don't think, once he comes back to fully fitness now. And the interesting thing about all those players that you whacked up there who contract run out at the same time, I think you're spot on, Paulie. I mean, there's no they're all great players, but there's no resale value in any of those guys, is there really? If they was to tie De Bruyne down to a big contract now, or Mahrez or Gundogan, when they eventually do come to the end, they're not going to sell them for any great amount of money anyway, are they? To be fair, Paulie, and I think that's interesting. But
the key is you have to eliminate the term resale value from your vocabulary. It doesn't exist anymore. The only time anybody might have resale value is if you pluck an obscure 18-year-old, I don't know, Jadon Sancho, And you could sell him when he's 22. But when you we speak about this every week. The 100 million pound deals are no longer going to the 26, 27-year-olds. They are going to the 22-year-olds. So you pay for them, and you're pay because I think about it logically. When you look at it's a bad example. When you look at Kevin De Bruyne right now, and you were going to say, "Oh, let's pay $100 million for him." Why are you paying that? Because look at his resume. He's got goals. He's got all these goals, all these assists for all these years. That's stuff he did. So you're going to pay City for the stuff that he did for City, and then get him when he's not going to be able to produce those kind of numbers for you? It doesn't make any sense. No. Instead, you pay the $100 million for a player when he's 22, and there's risk involved here, because what if the player doesn't turn out to be the star that you hoped? That's the risk. But in that case, if he does, you then paid for what he's doing for you. And then in turn, when you turn to sell him, people aren't going to pay they're going to pay $40 million, because they're going to be like, you got the best years out of him. And you got the best years out of him. We're not going to get the best years out of him. So therefore we shouldn't be paying that as much. You have to take the term resale value. It doesn't exist anymore. And a couple of comments here from Aravind. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, but frankly, you've either been reading me, or you've been following me on Twitter, or you were living inside my brain, because you're the only other person I have seen that finally understands exactly how it's working and exactly what I've been saying. United's board needs to take note. We have to get this out of our heads. Someone on Twitter said to me today, it'd be embarrassing if a player of Paul Pogba's standards left on a free. It'd be bad for the club. Why? You have to be willing to let players leave for free. And here's another one, which is very good. I'm lost now because there are other comments. You guys have lost me.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting though, Paul, because I think what we don't always think of in our minds, because we can't be bothered to calculate just how much an actual player's wages does cost a club. I mean, you look at the Jadon Sancho deal in the summer, everyone was saying, well, it's 120 million. That's just what Dortmund wanted, Paulie. The whole deal and the package for United was going to cost a whole lot more than that. We'd have been going into maybe near the 200 million mark, you know what I mean? And people forget that side of it. Players' wages of a package over a 5-year, 4-year deal is a lot of money, Paulie.
Right. At the end of the day, when we counted all the fees and bonuses and everything for the length of the deal, if both players would have wrote out their contracts with United, we would have spent £1 million less on Alexis Sanchez than on Romelu Lukaku. And that Lukaku had a $75 million price tag. Sanchez was, he came in a swap deal. This is a good comment from Adira, just like Aravind. This is exactly what I've been trying to explain to people for years. Is Pogba's an Adidas guy? Like, this is why Paul Pogba isn't leaving, and why United are better off running his contract out. Because he's not going to leave to begin. If you want him to sod off, he's not going to. He needs to go to an Adidas team. That leaves Real and Juve. Like, Real take 50% of his earnings, which is true, which means they'd have to make up. They'd have to offer him some more in wages to make up for what he's not getting here, except they're not going to do that for a 28-year-old, especially when they want Erling Haaland or Kylian Mbappe. Juve are all tied up with Ronaldo. They don't have the money either. And PSG are a Nike club. He's not going to a Nike club. Paul Pogba has one of the most unique brand contracts, for lack of a better word, for blanking on the term, in football. First of all, there's only 5 other people who even come close to the kind of contract that he has. That's Cristiano Ronaldo, understandable. Leo Messi, understandable. Neymar, understandable. Gareth Bale, understandable when the contract was given to him. And the 5th is Alex Morgan, also understandable. But he is, he gets money if Adidas are slinging his shirts. He makes more money off that. So, and the reason that Adidas want to keep him at an Adidas club is, and why they threw that into the contract, is to keep him at Adidas clubs, because Cristiano Ronaldo is a Nike athlete. who plays for Real Madrid and Juventus. Those are Adidas companies. Adidas makes a lot of money off of Cristiano Ronaldo. Portugal is an Adidas team, so they make money off of him internationally. Messi is an Adidas athlete who plays for Barcelona, which is a Nike club. So Argentina is Adidas. So they make money off. So Nike and Adidas are making money off of the other people's players. Yeah. They lose so much value to the other company because their players don't. So that's why they changed how they did things when it came to Pogba, and they gave him this deal that really basically makes him a lot more money if he stays with Adidas. So if he were to go to PSG, he'd be giving up a lot of money, in which case PSG would then have to, make good on that. And then that means it's a more expensive deal. They're not going to spend that kind of money on a 28-year-old.
I just want to take it back then, Paulie, now to obviously what Mark was saying in his earlier comment, where he suggested that obviously, is this good news for United, another 2 years of Pep? Now, I don't know what you think, but I'd have thought most realistic United fans might think that they're going to have to hold tight for a couple of years anyway, maybe until the likes of Pep and Klopp. I know it's not great because you want to win things against when the competition's at its height, but there's a feeling here that in a couple of years' time, Pep may move on, Klopp may move on. At the same time as United, if they continue to rise, they're coming to join them. If you know what I mean. So is this a blow, or to wait another couple of years? It's not a problem because that's probably about how far United are away at the moment.
I think it's certainly a little bit of a blow, because if you can't win until Pep and Klopp leave, then that's past the timeline that we were supposed to be on. We're supposed to kind of, maybe if everything broke right, be able to compete next year, but really not for another 2 years. Yeah. But it's not the end of the world if they're trying, because again, you need that flexibility to rebuild. Like, you're just not going to be able to replace De Bruyne that easily. You'll be able to do it a lot easier when you have flexibility. And if we're trying to get we're just trying to squeeze every last drop of energy out of this team, that'll be easier for them to be caught, and easier for, if United hit their stride, maybe they won't be able to keep up with us. It seems to me a lot like late career Ferguson, when we lost Ronaldo, we lost Tevez, we replaced them with Valencia and Obertan, and you looked around, you went, this team sucks. Rooney scoring 30 goals to carry us, but Nani on his day, brilliant, but his day wasn't every day. And Scholes is old. You can't rely on him every day. And Giggs was getting old. Can't rely on him every day. We won a title on 81 points. You looked at that team, and if there was any good teams in the league that year, we shouldn't have won the title. That team was terrible. And a year later, they managed to increase their points total. I don't know how, because the team didn't really get any better. Rooney had a better season. That's probably it. And they actually got 89 points, which is respectable. And the following year, they have probably also just as bad of a team, except they add Van Persie to take them over the line. And it brings us up to our next topic, Joe.
Yeah, Ferguson, is that right? Yeah, I'm talking about Alex Ferguson. Sorry, I lost track of where we were there, Paul.
I know, I was rambling a bit.
I had another question on Pep and the reboot, but never mind. Let's move on to Alex Ferguson and an interesting tweet that you sort of pulled up for today's show, Paulie. And this idea that this guy says tactically, Ferguson was never up there with the best managers, right? I'll just let you digest that. That's fine. That's point one. Point two was, but man management and motivation, he is the best of all time. Okay, that's point two. I'll let you digest that one. And I don't think I have ever seen a tactical masterclass from Sir Alex Ferguson. Thoughts? Now, Paulie, I'll just quickly give you my thoughts on this and what I said to you before we came on air when you showed me this tweet. And I said, unpopular opinion or not, I can definitely see where there's plenty of case studies to suggest that, point one, tactically, Ferguson was never up there with the best managers. There's plenty of case studies out there to prove that, right? And to be honest with you, when he makes point three, where he says, I don't think I've ever seen a Ferguson masterclass. That is another interesting one as well, Paulie, because again, I would have to sit here a long time to think, actually, when did we go out there and play a game against someone where we actually nailed it? I mean, the only thing that's come into my mind in this quick time I've had to think about it was maybe the Barcelona semi-final in 2008, Paulie, when I think he did a pretty good job over 2 legs at nullifying that up-and-coming Barcelona.
That was Muhlestein.
Yeah, but
that was, I mean, Michael Carrick even writes about it in his book. He goes, we didn't even speak to Ferguson that week. We came into training, and it was entirely with Rene Muhlestein, I believe, and we just went through drills. Here's where you're going to be. So this tweet, it's from yesterday. So if I'm sorry, it's a little late. It's from yesterday, but it was making the rounds on social media because people got really offended by this. And it's like, it blows my mind. Like, there's nothing wrong with this. He's not up there tactically with the best managers. Tactically, he was not a tactical genius. I don't know if I would say that I don't remember Ferguson ever having a tactical masterclass. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. You know, one of the responses was he had a terrible team in 2012-13 and he won the league. Like, how could you say he's not tactically with it or whatever? Because his tactics that year were give the ball to Van Persie and let him score. Like, that United team couldn't defend for their life. And he never made any changes to accommodate that. You know, like last year, 2 years ago, we couldn't defend for our life either. Solskjaer came in and made changes to accommodate that. Do we play more defensively now than we did when Solskjaer first came in? Yes. Why? Because we couldn't stop a nosebleed. And so it's, oh man, so a manager is, you know, playing to the strengths of his team. Like, wow, like must be terrible. Yeah. Like, he's absolutely right for playing to the strengths of his team and saying, get the ball to Van Persie. That makes him a great manager. It makes him a great coach. It does not make him a tactical genius. And there is nothing wrong with not being a tactical genius. Ferguson never had his own style. He was the king of adapting. And when he saw how the game was going, he looked for other managers for inspiration. When Wenger came and changed things up, he figured out how to, you know, blow by him and stop Wenger. When Mourinho came, he figured it out again. That was his key. He didn't come like Pep with develop his own style. He adapted. And that makes him a great coach. It makes him a great manager. It makes him the best of all time. To say he wasn't tactically the best to say that he wasn't a tactical genius does not take away from the fact that he was the best manager of all time. Like, I don't get why people are offended by this. It's really weird. What else do we got going on, Joe? What else maybe is going, or yeah, go ahead.
Just say quickly on that as well, Paulie. In the early days as well, he was helped by having just the best team in the league by a long way as well. I mean,
and that's why he didn't do well in Europe. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was a big thing. Was that? And I remember listening to a podcast about United when they played earlier this year when they played Juventus, I believe in '97, which was like the big wake up call, the aha moment for Ferguson. Because in the 90s, if you study any history of tactics even at a rudimentary basic level, they'll all tell you in the 90s England viewed tactics as, oh, that's the Italian thing or the continental. They didn't have them in England. They were very basic. It was everybody basically played 4-4-2 and you basically went out there and played. Who could score more goals? And it was only later where teams realized like, hey, and this is part of what Ferguson realized in Europe. He had the better team, so he didn't have to worry about scoring more goals. Like, his team did that. Then he would go to Europe, and they weren't succeeding, despite having the better team. And he realized, if we pummel you and take 30 shots in a game and concede 17 shots, we may, there are going to be days where we don't score on those 30 shots, and you guys might score 1 or 2 from 17 shots, and we lose. But if we take 13 shots and hold you to 7, if you don't score, like, we won't lose. Yeah. All of a sudden, and that was the moment of like, we got to shore things up here. And that was the first time he adapted.
Yeah, in the 90s, Paulie, when you say everyone played 4-4-2, well, no club had a better central defensive partnership than United. No team probably had a better central midfield partnership than United. No one had a front two as dominant as United. So that's why they were so good. And that's why I say tactically he didn't have to worry because he had great players that could dig him out of the hole if they weren't quite there tactically, apart from in Europe, like you say, because then when it did become tactical, teams were just a bit too clever for United in the early days. Now, you're saying that this is a great point, Pauly. We've talked about this before. I don't know if we've talked about it on this show or whether we've talked about it off air, but the way that Fergie changed the assistant every few years, very good point. And to move with the times, he realised he was getting older, but he realised he needed methods that changed, training ground methods, tactical ways of playing. And you got to give him credit. If he didn't change it himself, he did a very good job at changing his recruitment structure in a way that allowed him to do that as well.
Yeah, and keep the comments coming, guys. They are fantastic today. I'm going to go out and say these are not my burner accounts, even though they all seem to be saying exactly what I've been trying to say for weeks on end now. I agree with all of them. I kind of wish I disagreed with some because we could have more entertaining, but you guys are right on point. These are fantastic comments. Keep them coming. We want you to be part of this conversation and join the conversation. Joe, what do we got next?
Yeah, so what we've got next, Pauly, is this idea of, I think I've got to get it right this time, haven't I? This, they're talking about injuries and what's not been on social media that probably should have been on social media. I mean, we started off Red Devils Talk this week, Pauly, and we were talking about what West Brom will bring, what United will bring. And I think about the time you came in is when I was speaking and I was saying, well, actually, we can talk about formation all you want. This weekend might be about who's available for both teams and who's not available, if you know what I mean. So let's have a look at this one. We've got here, Harry Maguire completed 90 minutes for England against Iceland, which I'm so furious about. I have no idea why they felt the need to play yesterday. But he's reported some bruising on his foot. He'll be assessed at Carrington. MUSC staff are growingly increasingly concerned about Lindelof's back injury as well, which flared up against Everton. And I think you pointed it out during the Sweden game, Pauly. He started to feel it a little bit around about the 65-minute mark. Is that right? So, again, he's been training today, Lindelof, I think you said, but we'll have to see how he obviously shapes up ahead of the weekend. But it is interesting considering the amount of rumours that are going around at the moment with regards to coronavirus and injuries. There's not a lot of people talking about it, really, is there, Pauly?
No, it's weird. Look, Lindelof's a concern. He was holding his back constantly during the first half against France on Tuesday, and it was weird that he came back out for the second half as soon as they. It was an important game for Sweden. They needed to win to avoid relegation in the Nations League. So they wanted their best defenders. And as soon as they were 2-1 down. As soon as they went 3-1 down, they took him off, which is, frustrating from our United standpoint because he was clearly injured. And, Maguire, we were doing Red Devils talk when he took a knock on his foot. And, you only have to look at what Helly said right here. Harry will play. Yeah, he's going to play. I mean, the guy hurt his, what was it, his ribs last season? And
hip as well, yeah. He's had
his hip, and he missed one or two games. He missed the game against City in the League Cup, and he missed the game against Burnley. And we, lost both of those. So for, those of you who say Harry Maguire, not that important, those two games might say otherwise. And then he played the rest of the season, injured, by the way. And so he'll be out there. He's not gonna miss this. Lindelof's the concern because look, Bailly's hurt right now, and Lindelof. The Spurs match was both an opportunity for Bailly and also because Lindelof's back had started hurting, and he didn't play against Istanbul because they were trying to rest that back. And to say if it flared up again against Everton, then I mean, shame on you for letting him go play with Sweden. He shouldn't have done that. But that's going to be a concern. And back issues, especially amongst defenders, I'm just thinking about Rio Ferdinand in the last 1,700 years of his career. He had back, they don't seem to go away for defenders. Yeah. And that makes it a concern. So it's an opportunity for Axel to step in. And, this is what young players need. It's very difficult for a manager to because they're going to make mistakes. We saw it last year. He gave the ball to Aubameyang against Arsenal. He had a rough time against Demba Ba. in Istanbul. Like, they're going to make mistakes. So it's hard for a manager to look and say, I've got Lindelof fit, I've got Maguire fit, I've got Axel fit. I'm going to go with Axel and Maguire. And then when Axel makes that mistake that he's going to make, to then stick with him and not be like, I'm going back to Lindelof. But when there's an injury, now, Axel made a mistake, but I don't have a choice. I still have to play him. So this is an opportunity for Axel. I mean, even if Lindelof's out for 2 weeks, that's 4 games that Axel can come in and really grab this position by the horns, really. If we think he's the long-term answer, this is when you show it. You go out there and you make yourself undroppable so that when Lindelof comes back, he can't get into the team. I mean, do you think it's quite, let me just play devil's advocate for a minute, Pauly. Do you think it's very quiet out there on social media and everything regarding injuries? Because actually, if this goes wrong for Solskjaer, nobody wants to provide you with any excuses. That might be it, because that's the other thing is as much as this is an opportunity for Axel, the bigger concern for me right now, is Anthony Martial trained away from the team on Monday, away from France, and he missed the game on Tuesday because he had a back issue. So he's being evaluated.
He was on the bench, Pauly, but just because
he was on the bench, because everybody is on the bench in international football. He wasn't going to play. And it's a game that didn't matter. So I can't even foresee a situation where, they would have been like, we need a goal. Like, we're going to Tony. Marcus Rashford, now the reports are coming out that he was bleeding in the Arsenal match from his shoulder. There was blood, and he hurt it, and he was able to play on against Istanbul and Everton. And then he took the rest, but that's a shoulder injury that's probably still there. And that doesn't sit well if he's not 100%, because we've seen Rashford do this before. He hurt his foot against Liverpool. Yeah. When Ollie first came, Martial went down. Herrera went down. Matic went down. Lingard went down. The whole team went down. And then we made 3 subs, and then Rashford went down. He spent the entire game standing in the midfield circle, the whole second half, because he couldn't defend. He couldn't move. We got an international break after that. He didn't play for England, but he came back and he wasn't the same player. He didn't score. I don't think he scored a goal, or he did. He scored 1 goal after that, and that was the penalty against PSG. Because he could, he was playing on a bum ankle, which apparently never healed, because he also got hurt against West Ham last year in September and came right back from that. And he had the back injury, and, he just kept pushing and pushing and pushing until in January, his back gave out. And this is, you're right. You're absolutely right that it's silent on social media right now, because no one wants to give an excuse for Solskjaer if it doesn't go well. If Solskjaer rests these guys because they are hurt and they can't play and they lose, then it'll all be Ollie out because we lost. If he plays them, and the same thing happens again, the wear and tear on Maguire caused the longer term injury, or like Rashford and his back in January, because remember that everybody got mad at Solskjaer in January for playing Rashford, when the reality was Rashford was carrying the team. He broke his back because the weight of the team was too much. And then everybody's like, well, why was Solskjaer playing him? And it was like, because you were all up in there being like, he has to win this game. It's a game against AZ Alkmaar in the Europa League when we've already clinched qualification. But no, we have to win because we need to finish top of the group. And you put the pressure on him, in which case he couldn't rest Rashford. And it's the FA Cup, but it's Wolves. If you don't beat Wolves, then we're going to be like, you never beat Wolves. So he had to go to Rashford. Yeah. So all these players, I mean, we need them right now, because the other one is Edinson Cavani. It hasn't tested positive yet, but should you bring him around your team right now, given the Uruguay situation? Yeah. I don't know. So there's a lot there, and it's suddenly nobody is talking about all these injuries. I'm sure it'll be the topic of conversation tomorrow, because Ollie will be very coy about it and will definitely. He should come out fighting against all these international managers. Like, why did Didier Deschamps play Pogba 3 times in 6 days? Gareth Southgate playing Maguire on Wednesday. The fact that there was an extra match, I could see him coming out firing. Oh, we have to play the late game Saturday when we have to play on
or will he save it again till after the game, Paulie, like he did against Everton again, so he doesn't sound like he's making an excuse? Will he have another rant after the West Brom game again? I don't know. I think he will say.
You're right. You're right.
I'm not sure. I don't know. But there's three things at play here, Paulie. One, either United are so confused about what is actually going on regarding the fitness of their players at the moment, they don't actually know. Two, there's a psychological thing going because they trying to make out that things are probably a bit worse, so that when they come to the game Saturday, although it's West Brom, there shouldn't be much need for mind games. Or, are these problems really real, Paulie? And could we see a really interesting team go out there on Saturday? Is it like a mismatch of players?
I don't think it's an issue of United not knowing, because they didn't get these players back until today. So they're evaluating them today.
Yeah.
It's more of like, the people we've known that some players have picked up knocks, etc., but nobody on the internet is talking about it. And I think you are, I don't know for sure if your theory is correct, but it sounds pretty correct. It sounds like it's on the money. What's the team going to look like? Let's take that's a great way. Let's turn the page, look ahead to West Brom. We put out a poll this week that was looking ahead. Let's take a look at the results.
We have the results of the poll that's been, it ended on Tuesday, Paulie, but obviously people have had opportunity to look at it and comment. Just want to say we have had some fantastic comment today. We've reached 700 subscribers, which we're so grateful for. Let's keep pushing ahead towards 1,000. If you're enjoying this, do give us a like, give us a subscribe. Thanks again for all the interaction. And indeed, with our new show Twitter page at the United Happy Hour. If you're not following that, go ahead over to Twitter and give that a follow as well. We'll put a poll up there every week that we'll either complete or we'll read out on a Tuesday or a Thursday, and we'll get your points of view across. As for this poll question, Paulie, like I say, it did say for Tuesday, but we didn't get around to it on Tuesday because we had such a packed show, which was a great show. If you had a chance to see that, you can go and check that out as well on our YouTube channel. But the poll question was, who should be United's starting midfield pair against West Brom? So we're basing this on the fact that if we play a 4-2-3-1 or even a 4-3-3, I suppose, or a 4-3-5-2, whatever, we usually play like a double pivot in the midfield there. We've got here, my eyes are going poorly, so I'm going to have to get a bit closer. We've got 45.4% of you suggested that we should go ahead with McTominay and Fred. We had Pogba and Matic in there as an option. That got us 15.8%. Pogba and Fred, which was the second most popular combination, brought in 38.8%. And you put Matic and McTominay in there. That only got 2%, interestingly. Now,
let's say there are other combinations available, but Twitter only allows you 4 options in a poll.
Yeah, exactly. But Paulie, I mean, look, I'm not saying that McTominay and Fred can't be kind of attackingly dynamic or anything like that, but there is an argument to say, look, in a game against West Brom at home, where we have struggled this year, there's no doubt about that. So that's the caveat to this argument. United should be looking to try and maybe have a little bit more sort of progressive thinking with their midfield pivot. Would you not agree?
I'm actually kind of shocked that that McTominay Fred won out on this poll.
You'll be happy though, because I know you're a big Fred fan, aren't you, mate? So
Fred's our best midfielder. Let's call a spade a spade. Fred's our best midfielder, and certainly on current form, he's our best midfielder. He has, he's not perfect. He's got things that take him back. Some things that he has limitations is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Again, and we spoke about this a bit on Red Devils Talk last night, is we as fans look at this as the starting 11 against West Brom, and we're only looking at West Brom, and Ollie has to look at, he's got West Brom, then, in 2.5 days, basically, I've got Istanbul, and then I've got Southampton, and then I've got PSG. How are West Brom going to play? How are Istanbul going to play? How many games can I expect from this player or that player? Does this player fit in a spot that is better than, does this player fit better against Istanbul than they do against Southampton and or West Brom? all these things have to be taken into consideration. So when I think about it, I'd say you look at how West Brom play. I want to see eventually the Pogba Fred pivot. I think that ultimately, I've always said, and I've said this going back to last year, I think that will ultimately be our best midfield. If in a two, they could do what they need to do. And he played them together against Copenhagen and Sevilla in the Europa League, and they were fantastic. Yeah. Hard to do that this year because Pogba's form has been spotty at best. Yeah. Maybe, but you look at it and you say, well, West Brom is probably the game to try that. Not the worst game in the world to try that out. But Pogba just played 3 times in 6 days. Do you and you look and you say, well, when do we need Fred the most? Maybe Istanbul is the best game to try that out. When do we need Fred the most? Do we want Fred playing in the next 4 games? Or do we want to give him a break in one of those games? If we want to give him a break in one of those games, which is the best game to give him a break? It unfortunately might be the first one. Like we said this coming out of the last break. It's weird because United just were on a break, but the best game to rotate their squad over the next 3 games is Newcastle. And this might be the game to maybe give Fred a break. I do think that Fred and McTominay actually can be the right combination in this game because I think West Brom are going to play. They play defensively similar to Everton, and they'll leave open spaces. And Fred and McTominay actually did a really good job of passing into those spaces the other day against Everton. Then you go back to what Kieran said on Red Devils Talk yesterday about how, for the first 30 minutes, they're not going to give you anything anyway. It's going to be an ugly game. And really what we just have to focus on is pray that we're 1-0 up after 30 minutes, but really focus on making sure we're not 1-0 down. And if that's the case, then maybe you start with Fred and McTominay and you say, after 60 minutes, I can bring on more firepower and West Brom will be more worn out and we could beat him that way. And he's had results doing that in the last month. He's also had games where it didn't work. It didn't work against Chelsea. Arsenal, he didn't really change it. He made like-for-like subs. And Arsenal, he got it wrong from the start. But it worked against Newcastle. It worked against PSG. It didn't work against Chelsea. And, it's a risky strategy to play because,
worked against Leipzig as well. If you remember, we were very strong after the changes after
Leipzig. We were very strong. We were. We were 1-0 up, but he did. And that was credit. We were 1-0 up, and I said this after the Leipzig match also, is he could have gone defensive in that game. He could have brought on McTominay for Pogba. He could have brought on Dan James for Mason Greenwood and just
taking Matic off, if you remember, Paulie. I remember in the group he took
exactly. He could have gone defensive, and because RB Leipzig weren't getting anywhere close to United's goal. He could have gone defensive, shorted up, and walked out of there with a 1-0 win in Europe. Great result. And instead, he went for the kill, and it worked magnificently. And we're looking at some. I'm going to put some of your 11s up right now because we did also put out this morning, not a poll, but more of a survey question that just said, send us what would be your starting 11? And we'll go through with them. We'll go through and look at them now because
put that comment back up for a minute, Paulie. So we've had this one obviously from Lockesh there that says, I think Ollie will field a 4-2-3-1. Maguire will cover for Tellers as a LCB, Lindelof as CB, and Scott will play as an auxiliary right centre back, pushing AWB up forward as a right wing back. Obviously, Fred, as a right back. Fred is in the holding role in attack. It would be more like a 3-2-5. What do you think about this formation, Paulie?
This is essentially what we did during Project Restart last year. Was Matic dropped deep, and then Pogba and AWB and Shaw went forward. Pogba and Bruno operated in the middle of the pitch, and you had a front 5 of Wan-Bissaka, Greenwood, Martial, Rashford, and Shaw, and it worked really well. The thing is that McTominay doesn't drop between the center backs the way that Matic does, but against Newcastle and playing for Scotland, he has now been playing in the right of a back 3 as the right center back. And against Newcastle, we saw him dropping there. So not so much splitting the center backs the way Matic or Fred did, but dropping off to the right. And he was very good in that. He only started doing it when Pogba came in, but he was very good in that role. So I'd be down with that. The question is,
Paulie, some other options that have been suggested to us in the comments is another diamond, although after Arsenal, is it fair to say maybe diamonds aren't forever, and it might not be something with the personnel we've got that we can play, although Mark has also suggested...
That's the question is...
If Talent plays, it's maybe a bit more of an option.
Right, and that's the question is who's available? I mean, if, let's say, Martial or Rashford aren't available and Telles is, then... going maybe Mason on the left. Mason, I wouldn't trust Mason on the right of a diamond, but Mason on the left and maybe Odion Igalo. Or, Dan James played very well as in the front two last year, and I wouldn't rule out seeing him in this game, especially because West Brom will leave spaces open to attack behind them. I'm not saying I want Dan James out there. I'm not saying he's my first choice. I am saying I wouldn't be shocked to see him out there. But if Rashford and Martial aren't around, I wouldn't be shocked to see maybe a diamond, especially if Telles could play. But like we spoke about on Red Devils Talk yesterday, you've got a lot of questions about Telles too, because he's coming back from Brazil. It's a long flight. He did test negative, but now it's a match fitness thing. And again, you're asking the questions. He's played, basically one match in the last month. Can he play 90 minutes versus West Brom? Because you definitely need him against Istanbul. And then it's the question you're faced with as a manager is, do you go with Brandon Williams? And Hader brought up a comment here earlier that I hope that I can find, is basically Hader saying here, like, Fosu Mensah could play left back. He can. We saw him get the nod over Williams last year against Crystal Palace, but he provided the same, here we go. He provided the same issue. Is Williams as a left back disrupts the buildup. He's just terrible in the buildup. Defensively, he's fine, but he disrupts the buildup. And Fosu Mensah not any better. So you don't want to see that against West Brom. But maybe if the thing is, hey, for the first 30, 45 minutes, like it's going to be tight. Maybe you say like we'll play Telles for the final 30 minutes and hope that that's enough of a change along with some other changes to go out there and get a win, and then Telles can play from the start against Istanbul. Like, there are so many things.
Paulie, I want to throw another one at you, just because I'm looking at the comments in the comment. I know you can't find them all, mate, but I am trying to memorize them and then throw them at you. Someone else has suggested this idea of Donny as number 10 and Bruno playing in off the left. I know it's something that you've talked about before. Unbelievably, it wasn't Mark who suggested that. I know we all know that Mark is obviously Donny van der Beek's biggest fan, but it wasn't Mark who suggested that. But actually, just quickly on that one before I read this comment out, Paulie, what about this idea of Bruno playing off the left? We saw it for the last 20 minutes against Newcastle, and it seemed to work pretty well, but that was against a Newcastle team that were tiring and struggling under the pressure.
But that's the similarity. Newcastle and West Brom are very similar. People keep thinking West Brom are going to sit back. They don't. No. They aren't a full-on press the hell out of you team like Southampton, but they also don't sit back. And what United were very good at against Newcastle, which is what they're going to have, and they were pretty good at it against Everton too, and they're going to have to be good at it against West Brom, is they weren't just, they managed to bring Newcastle out. So Newcastle didn't sit deep. They managed to bring them out, which created space behind them.
Yeah.
And then they were, and they created a lot of chances. And then at the end, they were able to finally capitalize on the chances and they pummeled them with it.
Yeah.
And that's what they're going to have to do against West Brom as well. So I don't hate that idea, especially if it could buy you a rest with Rashford or Martial. I've been saying that this might be what they have to do. Is play Bruno off on the left because he drops back into midfield so often, and you need your number 10 to be in the middle. I do think you probably need to play Juan Mata on the right because that'll open up space for Wan-Bissaka to get forward. He'll cut in. He'll be that creator. And the last time we saw Mata, Fernandez, and Donny on the pitch at the same time, it was a little bit too everybody kind of going where they wanted to go and not enough in. So hesitant to say that they need to play, that the three of them should play. I will, this comment from
this one, yeah.
Like, again, basically coming through my head, Tellez, if he's not available, you go with Williams, or, maybe it's just let's not play him from the start to manage the workload over the next few games, because Shaw is out for probably another 3 weeks. Maguire, Axel, I guess if Lindelof isn't fit, if Lindelof is fit, I wouldn't be shocked to see Axel be the left back. Wan-Bissaka, then Bruno, McTominay. That's an interesting one. I would be down for that. I would probably go Bruno, Fred. Fred's been better than McTominay, and McTominay is not particularly the most defensive. There's a reason that when McTominay and Fred play, Fred's the holding. Fred plays in the more holding role. He doesn't trust McTominay to do that, and when he did it against Crystal Palace, he didn't do it. But then Van de Beek up front with James, Ighalo, Mata, and look, if Rashford and Martial are not fit, that's probably the best way to go, is James on the left with Ighalo and Mata, and then bring Mason Greenwood off the bench. Because again, Ighalo will give you that hold-up play and everything else that you'll need for 60 to 70 minutes to keep it close. And then if you can only get 20 minutes from a Rashford or a Martial, or, in those 20 minutes, you bring on that firepower to play. I honestly don't want to play Fred and Scott. Look, I don't want to either. I was surprised that the poll result said that we did. I think it's the game to give Pogba and Fred a run out. Maybe Istanbul is the game to give Pogba and Fred a run out. I'd also say maybe Pogba shouldn't play because, like I said before, he's played 6 times in a week. Also, his form has been terrible. But I think the thing at the end of the day is certain players, there's really nobody in the squad right now who I absolutely have to be in the 11. You need to build around me.
Yeah. But
nobody's been consistent enough to do that. So you're basically picking players here and hoping we all find our form and that we stay consistent. But the important thing is to say there's nobody that really has to be in there every game. So if Ollie decides this is the team that I'm going to need to beat Istanbul, and therefore I don't want to play some of these guys in back-to-back games, and that means Pogba plays against West Brom instead of Istanbul, like, does he deserve to be in the team right now? No, but it could just be a rotation thing.
Yeah.
So I think we need to remember that before freaking out when we do see this team sheet.
But this is what I find really, and going back to what we were saying earlier, Paulie, when you look at that team that Adita suggested there, where he suggested putting Ighalo, Mata, and James over, if these injuries are what we think they are, what we're hearing they are, then that could quite easily be the team, and that's what makes it amazing that we're not really talking about it on social media, is it? Because that would be a team that would raise everybody's eyebrows. But if that's the injury situation, then that's quite possibly what it will be. And I just want to ask you quickly, Paul, before we wrap up on this, and just this generic question really about formations and about, we've talked about it a couple of times on Red Devils Talk and again today, that, United are so dependent, well, not dependent, but they're almost wondering what West Brom are going to play like in terms of how they're going to set up and that. And we've seen Ollie sometimes guess right, against Arsenal, he probably got it wrong, and at Chelsea, we didn't see them playing the way that they did play. But if United were dominant and feeling confident, would it really matter how West Brom approach this game? Is it a problem that United are probably sat there thinking, well, our team has to, it depends whether West Brom are going to come at us or sit back. Would a good team just play their way anyway and just impose that on the other side?
Yeah, if we were firing on all cylinders, it wouldn't matter. You look at how we played post restart, it didn't really matter. Brighton actually surprised us a bit by sitting back, and it took us a while to break them down, but eventually we did, and that was that. Mark asked that I mentioned we enticed Newcastle to come out of us. How do we entice West Brom to come out? We did have a lot of the ball, but we played around at the back, and we didn't walk up the pitch. is basically what happened.
We were playing very poorly before that game as well, Paulie. That made Newcastle's mind up. They saw a run of form that we were on as well that thought, well, actually could get at us, if you know what I mean.
We played very direct, and we looked to pass forward. We had Dan James and Marcus Rashford getting themselves into the half spaces to receive passes. And we were making those passes too often, like against West Ham last season. We just went like lateral across the field, and then they would let our center backs walk up the pitch.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you're just condensing them, and now your center backs have the ball at the midfield, but they're holding a line at the top of the box. So your forwards and your midfielders all have to be in between this small area. And that makes it harder to pass the ball around. Really, you can only go wide. So even if Newcastle weren't pressing us and our center backs were trying to get the ball right up the pitch to Dan James or Juan Mata or Marcus Rashford, and then we were taking it and running at them. And that's the big key. Sometimes you just have to take the ball and run at people. It's not going to work every time. That's fine. You can lose the ball. You can then go and win it back. But this is what Ferguson's teams did also. They enticed you to come out. When Newcastle did get the ball, we backed off to entice them to bring it forward. Instead of saying, hey, just try to pick us off on the counter and then we're going to block that, but you still have all your men back. We let them come up the field, and then we trap them at the halfway line or right when they cross the halfway line. So it opens them up. We entice them to come out of that shell. And I think, Everton did the same thing, and I think West Brom will play like that. So it's really interesting. I think we said this before the Everton match. Like, it's the first time in a long time that I genuinely had no idea how we were going to line up.
Yeah.
I would assume Mata's going to play. You have to assume Fred is going to play because they haven't played over the international break. Maguire's a lock. Wan-Bissaka's a lock. Tellez is not. It depends on how he wants to handle Tellez. Everybody else, you'd think Bruno is going to play, but maybe you want to rest Bruno for Istanbul, Southampton, PSG coming up, and maybe go to Donny van de Beek. Bruno also played terribly on his last two appearances for Portugal were not good, and he was great against Everton. He was bad against Istanbul. He was poor against Arsenal. Like he also has not been consistent this season. Yeah. So it's interesting to see how we're going to go. I will say this, coming out of breaks, Ollie typically has a plan.
Yeah. Well, Paulie, look, we've given people 3 minutes and about 10 seconds added free. So I think we've been quite nice there. But I just quickly want to ask you, how do you see it going at weekend, mate? Come on, put your neck on the line. How do you see this game playing out, and what do you think the result will be?
Oh, I don't do that, Joe. I don't do that, and you know it, because every time
Paulie, come on,
you will not get that from me, because every time I say that we're going to win, we let everybody down and we don't win. So I always play it safe, and I always say a 1-1 draw. And we're not going to, it's the United Happy Hour. We are not going to do the United Happy Hour where every Thursday Paulie predicts another 1-1 draw. It's just not going to happen.
If you predicted 1-1 draws all the time, we'd be relegated, Paulie. So I don't think everybody wants to hear that, mate, to be honest. Well, actually 38 points might keep us up, but
38 points might keep you up. Plus I'm not always right. So maybe we'd win one of those games and get to 40.
Well, there we go then. Thank you so much, Paulie, for that, mate. I'll let you lead us out as you always do so brilliantly, mate.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all of your contributions and sending us the starting 11. It's a great conversation in the comments. I try to keep up with you guys, but you guys have been great today. Have been great today, which makes it harder for me. But thank you very much. We'll be back on Tuesday, where we'll finally have a game to look back on. But more importantly, it's a pregame show Tuesday. We'll be back just before Istanbul. So we'll be able to do this all over again, is to say, damn it, West Brom didn't work out, or, West Brom worked. Should we run it back? Wow. How are we going to approach Istanbul? We'll be back Tuesday. Have a great night. Enjoy the weekend. Let's hope for a freaking win.